Hello and welcome to the first webinar. For those of you that haven't met me before or don't know me, I'm Claire and thank you for joining me this evening for me to share all I know about creating a low maintenance garden. Time and time again I meet clients and they say, I can't get on top of my garden, I'm so busy, I'm working, the weeds keep coming back, I don't know what to plant. So time and time again I meet people who are tearing their hair out. They just want to come home and have the garden tidy. They don't mind maybe doing a little bit or paying for someone to come for a couple of hours every month, but they just can't seem to break the back of it. And so I thought, why don't I share all the tips and the solutions that I use when I'm working with my clients to create them a beautiful, simple, easy care garden. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, if you want to ask me any questions, please, there's a little chat box at the bottom, I've been told, so if there's anything that you want to know, if you just type that little question at the bottom, I'll either answer it as we go along or I can answer them at the end. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do now is share my screen so that you can see the presentation. Just doing this. Does that work? Let's have a look. Okay. Right. Share that screen. Awesome. Off we go. Right. So, how to create a low maintenance garden in 10 smart steps. Now, don't feel you need to do all of these 10 steps all at once. There's obviously an initial cost involved in doing any of those things, but gardens are sort of things that you can just chunk. You can, tackle one thing at a time. It's not something that you have to do all at once. So don't get overwhelmed. Maybe just choose one or two things that we're going to cover this evening that, for you, that you really identify with your garden. So let's get going. So this webinar, who's it for? So low maintenance gardens, perfect for people who are busy professionals, people who are working, full time, and when weekends come, you want to spend that time with your friends, family, doing all your other jobs. So, busy people. And people that just don't have time to get into their gardens. They want to spend time enjoying their gardens, having barbecues, having people over, but not necessarily weeding, all day on a Saturday. If you've just moved into a new place, or you've had the garden for a while and it's just looking a little bit tired, great for anyone that's renovating a garden, or maybe older people who just physically can't garden as much as they used to or would like to. Sometimes it's really good just to simplify things. It's much easier to look after. And then finally, if you are thinking of selling your home in the next year or so, definitely have a think about how that garden can add value to your home. So the people that are coming to have a look and potentially interested in your home can see a garden that's going to be easy for them to take care of too. Do a lot of work with real estate agents getting gardens ready for sale. So turn your garden into a real selling point for your home. Next one. So in the next 30 minutes or so, we will be talking about creating a low maintenance outdoor area. Plant choice is really important. So knowing when you go to the garden centres, when you go to the nurseries, what type of plants are you looking for to purchase, to put in the ground? Because there's nothing more frustrating than buying plants, which are expensive, and buying lots of plants often, and to find that they shrivel up and die within the first 6 months. Very, very frustrating and upsetting. So yeah, really making excellent plant choices right at the beginning is a key thing. Other things, weeds, of course. So we're going to talk about ways to keep those weeds under control. You can never completely remove weeds, but you can definitely put some very clear strategies in place for keeping weeds to a minimum. And also, final thing, just thinking about how important it is to feed and fertilize your garden to keep it healthy, because healthy plants are more resistant to disease, they grow faster, they cover up more space more quickly. So a healthy garden is very, very important to be a low maintenance garden too. So we're talking a little bit about fertilizing, which isn't something that lots of people do to their garden. Okay, a little bit about me. I've been working as a garden designer now for 3 or 4 years. I went to Unitec to study landscape design, and I was pretty proud when I was awarded the Best New Student Award back in 2017. I also entered the Westpac Awards under Best Employer category, and was a finalist there in 2016 with the team. So I'm pretty proud of those things. I love my job. I love designing great layouts for gardens that really complement the family or the person that's living in that house. Really passionate about plant choices and really interesting textures. And yeah, really strongly believe that with some, sensible, simple design ideas and some great plant choices, that everyone can have a beautiful garden that really requires minimal maintenance. And that's a bit about me. Some photos. This is some work that I've done in the last 2-3 years. This is a local garden. Their brief was low maintenance garden, and that was some photos of the garden 18 months in, lots of growth. So yeah, fertilising is really important to make your garden thrive and those new plants really come away as quickly as possible. Some very client photos of veggie patches and simple hedging. This gentleman wanted a really sort of minimal look. So yeah, simple is often best strategy for low maintenance gardens. And some other, this work was done before the lady was selling actually. Often repetition, as you see in that far left hand corner, just star jasmine placed all along a thin narrow border. So often repetition and keeping it simple is key often. Okay, ready to start, let's go. Number 1, losing the lawn, or if you're not going to lose it, maybe really think about reducing it. Now, keeping a lawn in New Zealand beautiful, without weeds and presentable takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. Either if you're mowing it yourself or you're getting someone to mow it for you, obviously it's an expense. And as you'll notice, over time it gets pretty much infested with weeds, so you're needing to fertilise it and you're needing to weed kill it ongoing. So have a really think about how much lawn you really need. Think about if you've got a back lawn, let's try and limit its size so it has a distinct border between what is lawn and what is garden bed. So if you've got strips of lawn at the side of the house that might get sort of muddy and used as pathways, be thinking about, actually, is this the best spot for lawn? Look at those areas that maybe are too shady or get really muddy, and think, actually, is this the perfect place for lawn, or could I plant something different, turn it into garden bed, or aggregate it, put a path, some hardscaping, pave and pebble, that sort of thing. So have another look out in the lawn area. Do you have a distinct, definitive lawn with edging? And do you have other random bits of lawn that are really annoying to mow? And could those be other areas, either sort of paving, pebbles, garden bed areas, something different? So maybe reduce the size of what you have. If you've got funny little spots of lawn everywhere, maybe time to replace them. And if you have a small lawn area which has real distinct edges and maybe a more modern house, have a real think about whether or not artificial turf could be a good option for you. More and more of my clients now are, if they've got a smaller section of lawn, are using artificial turf. So good for dogs and clearing up some dog mess. You don't have to mow it. It looks great now. It's not the AstroTurf that you play sport on. There's some really, really well made and convincing and very grass looking like artificial turfs out there at the moment. Normally, to just give you a rough idea, $140 laid per square metre. So it gives you a bit of an idea. So if you can work out, how much you're paying a lawn person or how much your time is worth, whether or not it might be a good investment to get some artificial turf. So first thing, think about your lawn, lose your lawn. Number 2, garden beds. So the more space you have devoted to garden beds, you can choose some big shrubs, and they will cover that space in your garden. And when you've got plants growing, then you don't have weeds growing so much. So opt for maximising garden bed areas. And with garden beds, what you're aiming to get is to not be able to see the earth. So you have a densely planted garden covered in plants. So you're not seeing bare earth and soil, you're just seeing your plants, okay? So I've put some links in here to some blogs that I've written. The first one is the 9 best plants to fill gaps in your garden. So if you go out to your garden beds tomorrow when the sun's shining, have a look and see, okay, is this a complete dense, matrix of plants, or can I see the earth? And if you can see the earth, it's time to be filling in some gaps. And there's some great plants that you can use to fill in the gaps. And normally you would only use maybe 1 plant as a gap filler or 2. So it's not going to look like a big mess. It's a sort of like a carpet that links through all of your garden beds to tie it all together. And normally you would choose 1, maybe maximum 2 of those fillers to create that cohesive whole. The other thing that I never see enough of in gardens that haven't been designed is a ground cover. So when I say a ground cover, I mean a plant that acts as a carpet that is no more than maybe 10 centimetres off the ground, often just, as I say, lying on the ground. And these are great for suppressing weeds. So if you've got a ground cover growing well on the ground in your garden beds, you're going to really, really minimise the weeds that come through, because basically they just block the opportunity for the weeds. So ground covers. So there's another link there to my 9 great ground covers link. Have a look at those. As I say, same with the fillers. You're only really looking to use 1, maximum 2 different plants as a ground cover. You really sort of think of it as like a carpet. In your house, you wouldn't have like 3 or 4 or 5 different patterns of carpet. It's the same with your garden. You just have 1, possibly 2 different ground surfaces, okay? And another top tip is that when you're going to look for plants, have a look on the little tag that's there and see how wide the plant is going to grow. So it's spread. So normally it has the height first, say 2 meters by 2 meters. What you want to do if you're trying to be as cost effective as possible is buy plants with a large spread. So I'm looking at least 1 meter plus for that. Because if you're going to buy a plant as beautiful as they are, that's only going to grow this far, and your garden is huge, you're going to have to buy tens, hundreds of them, and it's going to get really expensive. So if you want to be cost effective and clever about it, choose plants that have a large spread, 1 meter plus. Okay, one of the best ones that I use, especially if you've got a large garden, is a plant called Grevillea. It's an Australian dry tolerant ground cover, and some of those go to 4 meters. So you can imagine that you just get a lot of sort of ground cover for your buck. It's a good plant. I often use it. Okay, moving on. Number 3. Know your plants. Now, if you're like me and you're on the North Shore in Auckland, I've got someone coming in. There we go. Someone's joined. Welcome. So if you're like me and you are on the shore, you have, most of us have, there's a few pockets down in Devonport, but probably quite cluggy clay soil, which is great because it's filled with lots of nutrients, but it means that often with lots of rain, as you have noticed, it can get some real thick and cloggy and waterlogged. So it's really important that you know your soil, and you'll know if you've got clay. If you're over in the city, there's sort of pockets of volcanic areas, but mostly I imagine most of you that are watching have clay soil. So when you choose your plants, you want them to be clay tolerant. I've got a whole list of plants that love clay, which I'll send out to you after the webinar's finished. So yeah, have a look at those, and it's really advisable to use plants that love clay because you are living in a clay, clay soil area. Also think about their hardiness. Often New Zealand native plants, they grow here, they're really hardy. You can put them in and you can pretty much sure that they're going to survive. And finally, drought tolerance. I personally don't use watering systems unless I have a garden which wants to be sort of an English country gardens. But for most people, to keep costs down, you don't want to be installing water irrigation systems. Obviously it's costly and the cost of the water is costly. So you want a plant that is drought tolerant, that doesn't need to be sort of moist all the time. So think about that the plant is clay tolerant, it's hardy, and it doesn't need to be kept well watered all the time. So when you go to the garden centre, just sort of ask them and ask them to recommend to you, okay, which plants are going to tick all of those boxes for you. Another way of knowing which plants grow well is to wander around your street and your neighbourhood and just start to notice which of those plants that are looking really lush and that you see time and time again and that grow well. Have a look around, and you will know that you'll see the same plants time and time again that are going crazy. And those are the ones that, that if you want an easy plant to grow and you know it's going to grow well, have a look at what's going on in your neighbourhood. Often at the moment you'll see there's certain sort of fashions in plants that are doing well. So dietes, lots and lots of people have in their garden. They have a little white flower at the end and sort of like a flax-like leaf. Star jasmine, great climber, dark green with the white flower. Lamandra grass, which is that big sort of green big grass that you see a lot, especially in amenity planting and sort of sides of rows and that sort of thing. So those things you'll have noticed, they are bulletproof. You can put them in, you don't have to worry about them. So have a look around, see what's growing well in your neighbourhood. If you're completely flummoxed, often it's really good to just employ an expert for an hour or two to get to basically pick their brains and get all of their advice. Often that they will share with you nurseries that they use. You'll be able to access trade prices for their plants. They can write down a list of plants that grow well and that you like. So actually often it's really worthwhile, if you're completely flummoxed and don't know where to start, is to get an expert in. Just often I would say just ask for an hour of their time, and that possibly would be a really good hour, money well spent to get some expert advice at the beginning of the process, rather than going out, buying plants, not knowing quite what we're doing and getting them home to realise that A, they don't look great together or they don't survive. So expert advice is great, and so definitely there's certain people at certain garden centres that are incredibly knowledgeable too. Often go in during the week rather than weekends to find those sorts of experts working. And finally, when you're choosing plants, which is a real art, it's a real skill, you're trying and put together a group of plants in your garden that have some sort of matching or contrasting elements. So the image here that you see on the screen, you can see that the colour in the ground cover, which is Biddy Biddy, purpurea, has that sort of purpley colour. That's mirrored in the Vireo above. So you have that relationship between colours. So see if you can find maybe a colour of leaf which is similar to the stem or the flower. The flower colour matches maybe some of the foliage on a different plant. So you're sort of trying to get relationships between plants. Likewise, if you like a grass plant which has a very fine leaf, you want to contrast it with something which has a real big gutsy leaf. So use tractor seat ligularia a lot, has that big tractor seat leaf, and then that contrasts well with something with a very fine leaf. So you're looking either to contrast colours or leaf shapes and textures, or match them. So maybe you have all dark green glossy leaves but different leaf shapes, so either matching or contrasting, and see if you can pull together a group of plants that have some sort of relationship going on. Here are just some images here of some good plant combinations that naturally go together. That middle one there, you obviously have the same shade of green, but two different leaf forms. Then the image on the right hand side, the lovely ground cover there, you've got the small leaf contrasting with the larger leaf. There's no weeds going to get through in that far right hand card. There's just all plants going on. So that's a really, really successful ground cover planting as far as I'm concerned. That's sort of what you want the ground in your garden beds to look like. Okay, tip number 4 is ask an expert. I did mention that before, but if you're completely unsure where to start, get in contact with a reputable garden designer. If you have a look at the Garden Society or New Zealand Garden Design Society, there's a whole catalogue of lists of local garden designers. If you go down to the tip, or even go to local garden centres, often garden designers leave their cards there. So yeah, ask an expert, either a local reputable gardener or a garden designer, to come and spend an hour or so. Many of us, and myself included, give sort of a free consultation and a free quote, and even that you can glean quite a lot of useful information from them. And I would say expect to pay between $150 to $200 for a couple of hours. Normally most people are working somewhere between $50 to $100 an hour for their time, so that gives you an idea for budget. Right, 5, marvellous mulch. So mulch, there's all sorts of different types of mulch, but the cheapest is tree shredding mulch. So that comes from arborists who put trees and branches through shredders, and you get that shredded material out. Sometimes it can be a little bit green, as in a green colour, and you can get a whole sort of mix of different things that have gone through. So it's not the most beautiful looking, but it definitely is very effective. So, or other mulches, as you can get like a bark mulch, which is a darker brown, a lot more consistent in colour. We use that a lot. You may have seen, it's sort of gone a little bit out of fashion now, but we call it black decorative mulch. So it's sort of bark chips that have been stained black to give a sort of a real dark contrasting look. Or there's bark nuggets that you may have seen too. So the job that mulch does is that does lots of jobs, but the main thing is that it's acting as a barrier. We lay it normally at 10 centimetres thick. So that's when you're sort of calculating how much you need, you're looking at 10 centimetres thick. So that keeps the moisture in the ground. It stops the weeds coming through and out, so it suppresses the weeds, and it also keeps the warmth in the soil after summer. So it also, in the summer, it reduces the evaporation so that the water in the soil isn't lost. So yeah, it's a real sort of necessary thing to do, essential early on in your garden's life. So when you've planted your plants and they still haven't grown to their maximum size, you'll have obviously gaps around them as you wait for them to grow to their full size. And at that stage, it's really, really important to have some mulch down to keep those weeds down, keep the moisture in the soil, and give those plants the best possible start. Top tip: when you're using mulch with new plants, just make sure that the mulch isn't up against the stem of the plant. You just need to create some space and air around the base of your new plants, just so the air can circulate. It doesn't get doesn't get wet and rotten. So do not mulch right up against the stems and the bases of your plants. The cheapest place I know for these sorts of products is in Envirowaste. If you're on the shore, which is on Constellation Drive, the same place as the Tip there. They have the most cost-effective mulches and garden products. Other companies, you may have heard of Central Landscapes. They have a great range, but their prices are a little bit more expensive. So there you go, just sharing some of my suppliers. Okay, point number 6 is fabulous feeding. I talked a little bit about that at the introduction. It's all about keeping your garden really, really healthy, your plants healthy and strong, so they're going to grow and cover your garden bed area as quickly as possible. That means that if they're covering your garden as quickly as possible, the weeds are not going to be able to grow. So the more you feed, the healthier your plants are going to be. And you want healthy plants because they're resistant to disease, so they're going to live and grow and get big as quickly as possible. Twice a year, I would tend to fertilise, so spring and autumn, so just before those times of year where you get the biggest growth from your plants. Lots of different ways that you can fertilise. The easiest and the best way, and the one way that we use with clients that don't have dogs, are sheep pellets. So a bag of sheep pellets is around $12, and basically with a pair of gloves on, you just throw handfuls all around your soil. So it conditions the soil, breaks down, creates sort of a more organic soil, which is good with clay, because clay doesn't have so much organic matter in it, and then it returns all the nutrients back into the soil. If you do have dogs, then I would recommend either liquid fertilizer, which you can either hook onto a hose and spray it on, or into a watering can. Or you can get the chemical fertilizers that are sort of in a granular form and do the same thing. Wormweed people use too. So any fertilizer is better than no fertilizer. So don't get too hung up on it. If you're feeding your plants in some way, it's going to be better than if you don't give them any love whatsoever. So twice a year, get a couple of bags, 2-3 bags of sheep pellets or some fertilizer, and yeah, off you go. Moving on, hedge heights. Hedges. They are wonderful and they soften and green up your garden. However, they can be really, really expensive things to maintain. If you don't want to do it yourself and get up on ladders and you don't have the tools to do it, then you're having to pay hedge and tree trimmers to come and trim your hedges. Now, the changes in health and safety legislation in the last couple of years have meant that you need to have at least 2 people working with you, one to hold the ladder, one to trim the hedge, and the costs of insurances and all of those things have meant that costs for tree and hedge trimming, if doing it right with a reputable tree or hedge trimmer, has got really, really expensive. So before you plant a hedge, you need to think about, firstly, how tall do you really need the hedge to be? Is it just going up to the top of your fence, 1.8? Do you need it to go higher to screen out maybe your neighbour's view? Do you need it to go up to their cover certain windows in your neighbours' houses? Do you need privacy into certain windows in your house? Someone's coming in. Not sure. Okay, someone sent me a message. That's lovely. Okay. Good. Okay. Lovely. So before you plant a hedge, just have a think about all of those things. The most important is, how tall do you really, really need it to get? And if it's 2 meters, then you want to be planting a hedge a hedging tree that is only going to grow to about 2 meters, so that you're not going to be stuck with a 5-metre tall hedge in 5 years' time that you need to then get trimmed down. So there's a link here and everything you need to know about choosing a hedge. And basically I've listed in height order all the different hedging plants and the sorts of heights that they get to. So that will help you make a good decision about which hedging plant to use. Ask yourself things like, do you really need a hedge? Or maybe would a climber do as well if you're just trying to cover a nasty wall or an ugly fence or something like that. So there's some really good climbers and creepers that you can plant rather than a hedge that covers over nasty fences rather than a huge hedge. Likewise, same if you're trying to screen out a neighbour's window, do you really need a full hedge, or could maybe a strategically placed evergreen tree do the same job? So yeah, have a think about that. With do you really need a hedge? If you really do need a hedge, how tall do you need it to get to? Then choose a hedging plant that grows to about that size, so you're not going to be stuck with a nightmare in 5 years' time when the hedging plant that you have chosen has grown to double the height that you actually needed in the first place. So yeah, hedges can be expensive things. Point number 8 is wicked weed mat. So often if you've moved into a house, there was real sort of a fashion sort of 10 years ago, and probably more recently, that let's just weed mat everything in our garden, and then we won't need to worry about the weeds. But if any of you have seen weed mat over time, eventually the weeds do grow through. And the problem is that often if the weed mat has deteriorated, the weeds are coming through the weed mat, and then when you try and weed effectively, you break the weed off because all of its roots are still intertwined with the weed mat, and you can never actually remove all the weed for good. So it just comes back really, really quickly. The other thing about weed mat is that over time it kills your soil. We have, as I say, on the shore, clay soil. So if you've put weed mat over on the top of that, then plus mulch or stones, you're compressing clay soil, and it turns into a really basically dry, hard, dead soil. The worms cannot move into or out of the earth, so they then vacate, and you're basically left with dead earth. And over time, most plants will die, or at least fail to thrive or get to their maximum potential. The only time that I would use weed mat is if I'm using it underneath an aggregate. So if I have a stone pathway or an area where I'm not planting, but just wanted it sort of tidy with some sort of pebbles or something on that, I'd use a weed mat then, but I would not be using it in a garden bed area at all, because your plants can't spread and grow. And then we come back to our original point where you want your plants to grow and spread so that they create this completely planted garden bed area, which is sort of what you're aiming to get to. So yeah, if you've got weed mat in your garden, yeah, it's time to sort of have a serious think about that, because it's really difficult to weed through. And once you've mulched your garden beds, if you do see a little weed come through, it's really easy just to pull out. It just pulls out so easily in comparison to trying weeding through weed mat, which is a nightmare. Perfect pots, we're nearly there, number 9. If you've got a nice decked area, areas that aren't grass or garden bed, pots can be great to just neaten up an area, an opportunity to grow some vegetables, summer herbs, basil, that sort of thing. Rather than having 20 tiny little pots that you've inherited over the goodness knows how many years, focus on buying a few large pots or containers, because they conserve water, because you obviously have a larger mass of earth. It saves time on watering, feeding and weeding, because you've just got one large container rather than lots of little pots, and it just looks a lot cleaner and clearer in your space. When you're looking at choosing pots, try and keep either the same material for your pots or the same colour. So it doesn't look like you've got a big mishmash of, you know, red ones and blue ones and terracotta and smooth ones and all of that. So you're trying to, you know, have some sort of theme in your pot, so it feels like you've made, you know, you've designed them and they're meant to look a certain way. So either the same material, same colour, or maybe different material but the same shape. And there's a link there to an article I wrote about 3 biggest mistakes when buying pots and planters. Gives you some tips on choosing some containers that are going to complement each other and look really stylish in your outdoor space. And finally, yeah, a bit of, oh, I'm just thinking, I don't think I did that for one, number 10, watering wisdom. So talking about watering, I personally don't use irrigation systems on most of the gardens. When I'm planting, I would plant either in springtime or autumn. And I noticed someone just left a comment then, when's the best time to plant? So now is a great time to plant in spring. The best time is now, because you have the longest possible time between now and summer coming, with the sort of obviously that hot summers that sometimes that we have. So if you plant now, there's the, you know, nearly a whole sort of, you know, 8, 9, 10 months until that summer heat comes again. So it gives the plant as long as possible to sort of establish itself and get roots down deep into sort of water reserves deeper in the soil. So yeah, best time of year to plant is now, or spring. And probably for the first year or that first summer, it's important just to keep an eye on those new plants. I say rather than watering a little bit every day, you're watering once, but maybe only every 5 to 7 days. And you'll be watering a plant with a good 1 bucket of water. So you're wanting, you know, to do it really properly, really deeply once, rather than just sort of, you know, sprinkling the hose on it for, you know, sort of 5 seconds. So deep watering less frequently is better than, you know, every night for, you know, a couple of minutes, which maybe only goes down into the soil 1 centimetre. You actually want to drench the whole plant and encourage the roots to go down into the soil. If you only water lightly at the surface, you're encouraging the plant roots to grow up towards the surface, which then, you know, obviously they can get fried by the sun. So yeah, just think about when you plant and how you water to get those plants going. Okay, so I'm going to send you a copy of all these slides after the webinar today. And moving forward, you have some 3 options. One is to do nothing and continue to feel frustrated with your garden, which is definitely not what you want to do, because you've joined me this evening and it's great to see you. Or why don't you think about maybe choosing one of those or 1 or 2 of the ideas this evening and put them into action to sort of start moving yourself towards and having a lower maintenance garden. Doing it in stages is fine, absolutely fine. Yeah, think about maybe a few ideas that really appeal to you that you talked about this evening, and putting those into action into your garden. Or something that I'm working on currently is, if you want a little bit more help, a little bit more hand-holding, is joining me for a brand new design course that I've been working on the last month or so, which is Boring Backyard to Gorgeous Garden. Work alongside me when over a process of 4 weeks, we help you design a dream garden for you. We look at the layout and the structure of your garden. We think about, you know, create a wish list for you, and then start to choose the plants. So you'll basically have a professional garden design at the end that you've worked on, and I've helped you with that, which can give you a blueprint to move forward. So yeah, if you can't afford to engage a professional garden designer, you want to add value to your house and save some money, and just understand a little bit more about which plants look good together and why, and just to learn a few more sort of techniques that to be used to design a garden, then this course would be great for you. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. I'm looking for few people to work with to design their dream garden. It's not open for everybody, because I want to have the opportunity to be able to support you on sort of one-on-one Skype conversations, and be able to, you know, really share my knowledge with you and hold your hand along the way. So yeah, just looking for a handful of people to join me in this course, and over 4 weeks I share with you all the skills and the information that you'll need to design your own garden. Okay, so there's only 5 places. You'll receive my individual attention, and you'll be learning through videos, webinars just like this, handouts and PDFs, and then a one-on-one Skype consultation where we can talk about your ideas and tweak them and make improvements if that's what's needed. So I will share all of my design and plant knowledge that I've offered my landscaping clients sort of without thinking, and it's sort of sometimes now I sort of forget that people don't know all of those things. So I'm really keen to sort of help people, you know, have great gardens, even though they might not have the budget to bring in you know, a landscape designer, which I completely appreciate can be you know, a real barrier, and you know, very, very expensive. So that's why I want to share this information with everybody, so everyone can, you know, enjoy coming home to a beautiful garden and enjoying their outdoor space. A little bit of details around the program over 4 weeks, although there's definitely flexibility around that sort of speed. So week 1 is you basically discover your plant personality, what style of garden is going to work for you, whether you're more of a tropical person, more of a native plant person, or whether or not you want something a little bit more sort of contemporary and modern. In week 2, we move and start to think about what plants you'd like in your garden, which plants go together. So you basically have a plant palette, some hedges, some hedging plants, some ground covers, some wow plants, some fillers, a portfolio, a palette of plants that you can then use within your garden that are going to look good and grow well and flourish in your garden. The next week, week 3, is all about you drawing a plan of your garden, surveying your site, measuring up your garden, and creating a scale diagram that you can use to then design where your pathways are going to go, what your garden beds are going to look like, how large your garden beds are, and then you can then start to place the plants that you've chosen into your site plan. So in the week 4, we bring it all together. We spend some time doing some sort of one-on-one Skype work and work on the phone, just basically tweaking your final design so that it's ready to go. And then I will share with you all my contacts, all the nurseries, my trade nurseries that I have trade accounts for, all of those sort of information, so that you can access the people that supply me with all my plants, people that I buy pots from, all of those sorts of contacts I will gladly and happily share with you to enable you to get your garden to the place where you want it to. So I'm offering an early bird discount, valid until the end of this week, the 7th of May. All of those resources I've sort of tallied up, and sort of $375 for all of those resources, but definitely the early bird discount there is $59.99, so $60. You'd basically save that in the, being able to buy plants at trade prices. So I just think it's a great opportunity, and it would be wonderful to have you with me. So I will send you the link for that, and if you'd like to join me on that journey, it would be wonderful to see you. The link is there to register. I've got over 15 tonight, but I only have 5 places because, as I say, I want to be able to give people one-on-one sort of coaching and support them in designing their gardens. So I've only got 5 places, so please grab those places quickly. It's going to be really fun. I can't wait to share all the knowledge as we go through that process with you, and definitely together I think we can create a gorgeous garden for your home, and learn some new skills and plant knowledge, and yeah, design and layout and different garden structures be fascinating. Definitely if you're keen on improving your home and garden and creating some value out there. So yeah, join me if you can. Lovely. Right. A little bit over, lots of talking. I hope that you have picked up a few top tips or a couple of interesting things this evening. Thanks for your time. And yeah, I will send a copy of the slides plus the links I've talked about this evening to you via email. And yeah, we'll stay in touch and look forward to working with you and keeping in touch in the future. You have a great night.